Hi students, I'm Mrs. Provostgard. I'm a teacher at American Preparatory Academy in Salem, Utah. Today I have a special guest to talk to us about ancestral Pueblonian people and the Hopi. My special guest's name is Mrs. Billat, and she is an archaeologist. So I want to give her some time to tell you what an archaeologist gets to do in their job. Mrs. Billat, thank you so much for being here with us today. I'm so glad to be able to have this chance to talk to you. Could you tell us a little bit about being an archaeologist?
An archaeologist is a person who studies the ancient history of a people and a culture, having to do with everything, their settlements, their transportation, the way that they live their lives, and the things that they live their lives with. Pots and pans and bowls and knives and everything that they use. I became an archaeologist in 1985, a professional archaeologist, and most of the areas that I've worked in have been in the Southwest, and I studied the ancestral Puebloan people most of my career.
So you have formerly worked with the Native American groups, the ancestral Pueblonian people and the Hopi. Can you first tell us about the ancestral Pueblonian people and maybe show us some artifacts?
Yes, I can do that. The ancestral Puebloan people were around here in 1200 BC, and they settled mostly on the tops, the plateaus, high areas, in the cliff faces where there was plenty of water. They originally started out as nomadic hunters and gatherers, and they basically went to find their food wherever they could, hunting animals, growing or picking, seeds and everything, vegetation that was already existing. And then after a while, in early, about 500 AD, they started becoming more settled, wanting more, building more pit houses, actually kind of developing a culture. They were called the basket maker people at that point, and they actually did make baskets because that's what they had the most to work with was native vegetation, yucca plants and things like that. They were, later on they developed pottery, and some of the pottery exists today. That's what you'll see on an archaeological site on the ground. And also you would see arrowheads and parts of, when they used to make arrowheads, the chips that came off them. And then you would be able to find, that's how you know where they were, where the sites were. This is a spear point that they used probably to catch kill larger game, deer and bison if they were around. This is a spear point or a little baby arrowhead that they used to get lizards and birds and smaller rodents possibly. And here's another style of arrowhead with a different kind of base. This one is actually an earlier piece, but it's a chip off a piece of basalt. Utah has a lot of basalt rock, and they made use of everything pretty much to hunt with. The pottery, this is actually early stage basket maker type pottery. Notice the kind of thickness of the pottery and the dull color and everything. As the ancestral Puebloan people became more adept at making pottery, they also became more adept at painting, and pottery became very decorative with black on white paint and red on black paint, and that's pretty much what the Anasazi that lived in, or the ancient Puebloan people that lived in the Pueblos had.
We've been studying the Hopi and Zuni in our classes, and we were hoping that you could tell us a little bit more about them and hopefully show us some of your collection of Kachina dolls.
The Hopi and Zuni are actually descendants of the ancestral Puebloan people. They are some of the ones who actually live in the Pueblo-style houses that still exist today. In about the 1800s, the Kachina dolls were first, they found them first with the Hopi, and they were a very crude, just a solid piece of wood that they carved out, sort of generally a figure, and it looked like a doll, or looked like what we describe as a doll, but not fancy or painted up as much as they are today. The Kachinas actually represent the spirits of the earth, and they represent various seasons, and it's a way to teach the children about the importance of the earth and the four worlds that are represented on the planet with the Hopi Indians. The Kachina dolls are a way to teach them and to keep them informed about what's going on. It also helps their culture be more, they learn about their culture better. So every season, basically it runs from the winter solstice to through the spring and summer. And the idea is that the Kachinas represent the, sometimes they represented the fertility, trying to make sure that there were good corn crops, good plant growth, lots of water, good earth, that kind of a thing. But there were some Kachinas that were representing fun things too. So a lot of times the Kachinas had to do with dancing or a celebration of a certain time period, of a certain season. So, and then so all the people would gather, and they would go into, some would go into the kivas. The Kachinas, the adults would dress up in costumes like these Kachina dolls, and they would try to, they would dance, and it would help them, the children, to understand why they have this Kachina doll that looks like someone who's dressed up like one. This is a Kusharan Kachina, and he is what they call a clown Kachina, and he is like the crowd entertainment. And they used to provide gifts and clothing and things for the children, and help to keep everyone from being bored while they're waiting for the fancy Kachinas to come out of the kiva. Here's another Kachina that represents, he's a wolf. His name is Ahote, but you see his little teeth here. And so that would be kind of scary if I was a little kid, I think, looking at that. But anyway, this is how they taught their children the different phases of life, and how it was really important to respect the earth. One of the main crops that the Hopi Indians grow, one of the main crops that they grow is corn and zucchini, squash. And so this is, I call him Zucchini Man. I don't know if he has an official name, but he's probably my favorite guy. They used to make Kachina dolls. They would make them all out of one piece of wood a long time ago. And that was part of those are the ones that are most valuable now.
Thank you, Mrs. Billat, so much for taking your time to show us your collection and talk to us about these Native American groups.